Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and why that large gray cat has been sitting on the bar table all day. At a corner table by the fire are two people. One of them is saying, "No, seriously, that cat's been staring right at me." And that's me, Matthew Mellema. Welcome to Believe to See. We are a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. All right, so I'm going to throw a word out into the podcast ether. Catechism. Okay, what does that word make you think of? What are its connotations? A list of rules? Maybe esoteric answers to memorize for a Sunday school class? Or how about one of those dusty old documents that your Catholic and Presbyterian friends really like? What if I told you that catechism, rightly understood, is actually way more than just a list of rote answers or rules? In fact, they can contain the entire Christian story of creation, fall, and redemption. And that story can be appreciated even if you happen to be a young kid. Okay, but how would you go about teaching the catechism to reveal that story to young kids? And to take it a step further, how would you go about, say, drawing illustrations for that? Well, fortunately, we have the perfect person here to answer that question. Natasha Kennedy is an artist and an illustrator from Seattle, Washington. Among other things, she illustrates the FatCat series of books. Me, my wife, and all my kids all super love these books, so I am thrilled to officially welcome her to the Anselm Society Digital Pub Table. Welcome to the table, Tasha.
Thanks so much, Matthew. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it is so great to have you here. So let me cue the listeners in on this a little bit. So, like I said, me and Danielle, my wife, we are big fans of books. We read them to our kids. So before we started going on the show, me and Danielle asked our kids, "Hey, do you have any questions for Tasha?" And my 6-year-old said, "Why are they called FatCat books?" So that is the first question I have for you, Tasha. Why is the series of books called FatCat books?
Well, I want to say it's because there's a fat cat on every page, which there is. But no, the whole idea kind of kicked off when my editor was trying to come up with a children's book line. Mm-hmm. He had this really fat cat, and it's like a chonker, and he used to take pictures of his toddlers trying to pick it up, and they can't, because it's just this cat just looked like a pillow, and so he kind of cooked up this idea of fat cat, meaning standing for fat catechism, fat, using that word full of richness, full of life. And the whole thing is the word catechism sounds so big and inaccessible to kids, but there is nothing all that scary about a fat cat, and so we're kind of trying to condense the essence of catechism, Lord's Prayer, Apostles' Creed, and 10 Commandments, make it feel accessible for kids, make it feel like something they can connect with.
That is so cool. And yes, I do agree that trying to pitch the word catechism to my kids might be a little tricky. They're see, there's a big fun cat. That's just great. So
yeah.
So let's get to your involvement here. How did you first get connected with this project?
Well, I kind of had a backdoor entry. My husband works at Lexham Press, and he heard they were looking for illustrators. And so he went up to the editor, was "Hey, do you want to see some of my wife's pictures?" And he was "Yeah, that's okay." My wife can draw. So he's "Hey, just drop some concept art." So I drew some concept art, and he showed it to the editor, and he's "Great, let's sign the books." It was just he just loved it. And so, so we just kind of started a little team and dreamed up the first 3 books. Yeah.
All right. And yeah, it seems like correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like there's 3 core books in the series, then other books that come off of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it started because Lexham Press has these books that they call Christian Essentials. They're like these little kind of like pocket-sized books for adults, and they kind of cover books like they cover things like Lord's Prayer, baptism, Lord's Supper, and what my editor wanted to do was come up with a kids version of those. And so the first three books he wanted to do were those three: the Lord's Prayer, Ten Commandments, and Apostles' Creed. And something that's cool is the first book we did, the Apostles' Creed, the adult version was written by Ben Myers. And so he ended up doing the text for the Apostles' Creed. So that was really cool because there was like that direct line. So yeah, that's kind of how we started. But then we've done 2 holiday books, a Christmas and Easter book. So that's kind of like, those are like the main ones. Yeah.
That's really great. And let me also, listeners, I'm going to put in a plug for the Easter book especially, because it has this sort of repeating line at the end of each page, like, did the King of Easter rescue this person? And then the kids are supposed to yell, yes! And I can always tell when that is the book that my wife is reading the kids at the breakfast table, because I can hear it clear upstairs when I'm getting ready for work. I hear, yes! Like, okay, it's the Easter book today. There we go.
That is awesome.
But I am just really interested with how you worked with these authors. So like you said, you had Ben Myers for the first one, and then you've had Harold Sankiel for the subsequent ones. Let's start with Ben Myers. What was the process like of working with him, especially knowing that he wrote sort of the grown-ups version? Did he?
Yeah.
What was it like? You'd go back and forth with different things, or did he sort of give you the manuscript? You work from there. What was that process like?
Yeah, the first book was definitely like different to all the others. It was our first book, and Todd was like, he kind of like has this relationship with Ben where he'd write to him and be like, hey, you want to try doing a children's book? And Ben was like, I can't really think of anything. So Todd asked me to draw a sample page. So the first page I ever did was the suffered under Pontius Pilate. And you have this like spread of Jesus under trial. And so Todd sent it to Ben, and then Ben replied with the written text. Like, he was just like, oh my gosh. And he just got so inspired. He like wrote it down. And so that book was interesting because Ben very much wanted to be inspired by the art. And so he would have me illustrate it, and then he'd write the text, which was an interesting process. Because there were 1 or 2 pages where I drew the picture and he's like, no, that's not right. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do another 10 hours, draw another page. But it was really cool because he's like, I was already a fan of his work. And so I kind of got to fangirl a little bit working with him. But for the most part, Todd kind of like mediated between us. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the listeners, so first of all, listeners, if you haven't ordered the books already, what's taking you so long? But for those who haven't read them, the way these are all laid out is like I'm looking through the Apostles' Creed book right now. So it has like the first 2-page spread is I believe in God, the Father Almighty, and then it has like a few lines of text explaining it. Then the next set of pages is Maker of Heaven and Earth. So it sort of goes line by line, explaining each one as we go. So the thought of being tasked with you being tasked as the artist of sort of setting the tone for that, I'm not even an illustrator, and that makes me look like, it's a lot. So what was your process like for that, especially knowing that he was going to sort of use that as his launching point?
Yeah, it was definitely intimidating because like, I'm like, man, the Apostles' Creed has to be my first one. I'm like, can we just start with like Lord's Prayer or something? It's like, this is like the foundations of our faith. It's like so theological, and the first page I had to do was like God the Father, the invisible God that you're not supposed to draw. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hated doing that page. I still laugh about it because I'm like, oh, that page is terrible. Because it was my first one, but so yeah, it was really, really intimidating. So it was kind of like, we just took it each time. And so me and Todd, my husband's kind of on the team, and like using like Ben's book and stuff, every time we came to one of the spreads, we'd find a bunch of scriptures throughout Bible, trying to use both Old Testament and New, and be like, okay, what, like, what best represents this. And we tried to really stick to Jesus' life. So Jesus is on every page. He's the fulfillment of all these things. We want him there. So we kind of would come up with a vision. I'd pencil it out, send it to my editor, and he'd be like, okay, yes, do it. And then he would always say, and add more animals. Just like, if you notice that every FatCat book has more animals, I'm telling you right now, it's Todd's fault. I'm like, there's enough animals, Todd. But it's good.
Well,
it needs
for the record, my kids are totally on Team Todd here. There can never be too many animals, okay?
Yep.
So whenever you think, I think I have enough animals, just picture Todd and my kids. Be like, no, I think we need to add more.
I think we need some more. Yeah.
And there's also one of these like running things is there is actually for the FatCat books an actual fat cat. So like a cartoon gray cat who's on each page. So whose idea was it to sort of play Where's Waldo with the fat cat?
Yeah, it was like kind of like my husband thought it up based on Todd's actual fat cat, who sadly died like the year that book came out. But I based it off him, and we kind of like we all are like Richard Scarry fans. There's like that little gold bug that hides and stuff, and we're like, come on, kids love Seek and Find. Every kid, I don't even care how old you are. It's like adults are looking for fat cat. Yep. So as an illustrator, that's really fun for me because when I'm crafting a page, I'm like, okay, where am I going to hide this cat? It's really fun.
Well, and also just one of those points too is that, me and my wife, just like a lot of parents, we read these books for kids over and over again because, like our kids keep asking for it. We keep reading it. So it's really nice to have with each reading. It's like, oh, that's something I noticed here. That's something like little that they added. So it seems like that a lot of work went into this. So just know your readers, both kid and adult, appreciate it.
That's really cool. Like we spend probably too much time on like putting Easter eggs in these things, like whether it's like theological symbolism or like I hid an emu in one of them because my husband's Australian. I did it as a prank, like it's just like, we'll just always come up with stuff in there. So it's so cool to know that we've got kids out there spending time looking at them. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of questions for you about the theological symbolism. So that was something just sort of going through this reading to like prepare for this podcast that I noticed and I'd like to talk to you about. But first, let's just talk about. So I'm just really curious going back to this idea of the picture sort of driving the text here to a certain extent. So you talked about like research you would do, sort of theologically, but was there sort of like an emotion or a tone you wanted for each page? And if so, how'd you go about doing that?
Yeah. It's a great question. I feel like Todd really gave me a lot of freedom to dream up these pages, and like, so a lot of the times I would come to a page and be like, I see it in my head. Like, I know exactly what I want to do. The Lord's Prayer has a page called, the page for forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. I was like, I know exactly what I want. I want like an over the shoulder view of Jesus looking down at the mockers and him like, like looking, like a tear coming out of his eye. I'm like, I want you to like see it from his perspective. Like, who's not going to forgive their enemy when they've like seen this picture, So yeah, a lot of the times I'll just come and I'll bring it to our little team and I'm like, hey, this is the vision I've got. And sometimes Todd will be like, yep, do it. That's perfect. And then sometimes we'll be like, but we really need this element, and so what we'll do is in those meetings, like, I'll come with my vision and he'll kind of like give me stuff and I'll do a really quick sketch out and show it to him. Be like, that's good, but maybe change this, So yeah, it's like, but it definitely feels like I have they've given me a lot of voice, which not a lot of illustrators get, a lot of times it's just like, hey, here's what we want, draw this, whereas I feel like I get to be a part of the creation, which feels really special.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like that's such a cool process to hear about. And one of the things I appreciate, because, here at Believe to See, we emphasize stories. And I really appreciate, first of all, how your book series takes, like I mentioned earlier, stuff about the Catechism, so Lord's Prayer, Apostles' Creed, and tries to fit it within a broader story. And one of the ways you do that is tying everything. It seems like pretty much every page has a scene from the life of Jesus in it.
Yeah.
So tell us what went behind that decision to, first of all, make the catechisms a story, and second of all, to make this story, to make Jesus the hero of that story.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of our big emphases for the FatCat books is that Jesus and his word are, everything is fulfilled. Everything he's given us is fulfilled through him and his word. And we're very much about reading the life of Jesus through all of Scripture, Old Testament and New. And so we felt like if we're giving kids a theology to base their understanding of their faith around, we want Jesus right at the center, because that's where he is. Like everything, he is the fulfillment of the law. So when we did our 10 Commandments book, we were like, yeah, we're not going to do like, oh, don't commit adultery. Yeah, let's go back to David and Bathsheba or whatever. It's like, no,
don't do what David did.
Yeah. We really didn't want to do a don't do this. We wanted a positive thing where Jesus is the fulfillment, and so that's kind of why we were like, hey, and it also actually helps like with illustration, when you're coming up with a vision for stuff like this, what you need is limitations. You need like borders to work within, and doing everything through the life of Jesus really helps with that, because it's like, okay, we've got some constraints here. We're not going to be drawing this kid in their house, or we're not going to be drawing I'd like to do Old Testament stuff eventually because I love it, but yeah, we really, really, really wanted to make Jesus right at the center.
Yeah, so I especially noticed that with the 10 Commandments book. So again, listeners, 10 Commandments book is coming out or beginning of this year, so like January 2024, and it's going to be like Tasha said, the third and sort of the core series, right? So the Lord's Prayer, Apostles' Creed, and the 10 Commandments. So Lord's Prayer and Apostles' Creed, they're already out. I hope you all have ordered them already. But for those, it absolutely makes sense to do, through the life of Jesus, because, Apostles' Creed, most of the lines are about Jesus to begin with.
Yeah.
And Lord's Prayer, Jesus is the one who taught us that. So that also makes sense. But as I was going through the 10 Commandments, as I was reading through the copy you sent me, I was thinking, they did this so well, because something that I didn't even think about until I was reading is like, this is definitely the hardest one to do. Because left on its own, it's just like a series of 10 things. Don't do these 10 things. And just on their own, it's very hard to do something about it. So your decision not only to tie each one to like a biblical scene, but a scene from the life of Jesus, it made it so much more living, so much more relatable, and definitely tied it into the larger story. So I really appreciated how you did that. And I think it'll just be so much more effective than so much of the other stuff we see on the topic. And leading into that, I have a question about a particular element of your design, and that's the design for Jesus, because as we've already mentioned, he's on pretty much every page here, right? So getting the Jesus design right is going to be very important, and I'm guessing a lot of thought went into that. So what was the process like?
Yeah, great question. Well, I remember when I was doing the concept art, and we were kind of coming up with designs and like what was the vibe we wanted the art to have. It's got this kind of like Byzantine mixed with old Disney Ivan Durrell stuff. Like we just wanted it to be classy, but also like fun for the kids, because we love like the richness of tradition. And so when I was kind of coming up with designs, I did this portrait of Jesus, sent it to my editor, and I was like, I made him darker than most of the Jesus you see out there, and sent it to my editor, and he was like, darker, which I like laughed, and he was like, no, I'm serious. And I know like, sometimes it's fun to be like provocative, just for the heck of it. But that wasn't necessarily why we did. One of the main reasons why we made his skin darker is because one, when you look at the vast spectrum of colors you can use for a Jewish man, it's actually quite wide. Ranging from light to dark. It can be. There's a lot of options to choose from, and most of Western art has been a pretty like white Jesus, and we're like, cool. that's cool. Jesus came as familiar. He came as one of us, and he came as a man. If you draw Jesus as a man, you've done well, but we're like, let's err on the dark side this time in a in a colorful way. Not the dark side of the force. So yeah, we came up with the design, and we hoped our, the higher ups wouldn't shoot it down, but they loved it. And so we ran with it. And we get some racist comments every once in a while. It's like, what the heck? No one likes that we're drawing Jesus anyway. You get those people too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that is one of the things that stood out to me, because like you mentioned, your Jesus has brown skin and black hair, and it's, so a couple things that I remember noticing at different points that jarred me at first, but then when I gave it a second, I was like, oh no, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's first of all, like you already mentioned this, but it's perfectly normal for all people throughout the various centuries of Christianity to make Jesus look more like them, right? So if you'll go into churches in England, Jesus looks like a white English guy. If you'll go through in Africa, like Ethiopian iconography, Jesus is Ethiopian. I saw this one picture. It's really fascinating. It's by an I think a Korean Catholic artist, and it was showing pictures from the life of Jesus, but they're all in that old Korean style, like you'll see in museums. And it was really jarring at first, but it was like, oh no, that actually makes just as much sense as all of our Renaissance paintings, right? Like it's the exact same principle. Yeah. So that was the first thing. Then the second thing, it was one of those kind of silly National Geographic specials that you watch sometimes. And they found the skull of this man who is this Jewish man who lived roughly in the time of Jesus, roughly the same area. So he's, roughly a contemporary of Jesus. Okay. And they did the facial reconstruction where they put the clay back on where the skull, and they give him the hairstyle like he should have. And the result was jarring at first, because it's not the version, I saw. But then you look at it, I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense, because he has brown skin because he's a Jewish man in first century Palestine. And this is interesting. I'm not sure if this related to it. I just thought it was interesting. He has really shortly cropped hair, which when you think about it, apparently if you look at the depiction of Jewish people in mosaics around the time, most of them had short cropped hair. And, Paul had his admonition about men to keep their hair short. It's like, okay, it's probably a stuff. That has nothing to do with anything. I just thought that was interesting. And it leads to the larger...
totally is.
It leads to the larger point. It's very common for us to sort of recreate Jesus in our image, which can be a good thing, but also a dangerous thing, like the nasty letters it sounds like you get sometimes. Mm-hmm. But there's also this element of wanting to see something of yourself in Jesus. I'm guessing, I might be reading too much into this, let me know. That for this, you kind of wanted to say, it's like, pretty much whatever race you are. And I think that's just a success that you did here. You can see something of that in the Jesus you drew. It was all that is to say, I thought you did a great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. I wanted him to be Jewish and yet also represent the people who love him,
Exactly.
Yeah. And I want any kid from any country to look in one of these books and find someone like themselves. It's like, again, FatCat is making Jesus accessible, making him feel familiar and safe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like the way you phrase it. He's, one sense, Jesus came in a particular time in a particular body, right? But another thing, he's someone we all know. So it's being able to capture both of that. So let's go on now and talk a little bit about some of the other religious symbolism that you use throughout the books. And again, this is something I really appreciate. I love me some iconography history and some religious symbolism history. I'll point out one that I noticed, and if there's some other examples of cool things that you put in there, I would really like to see. I noticed for the Apostles' Creed one, where the one you had the line, "He descended to the dead," and you used this very famous icon of. Sometimes it's used as the resurrection. Sometimes it's used as the descent into dead. But it's Jesus going down into the realm of the dead, so Hades or whatever you want to call it, taking Adam and Eve taking them both by the wrist and like holding them up. And that's you did a version of that, and you added a lot of the little things, like you added the keys scattered all around because he like has the keys to the underworld now, and it was just really great. So that was really great. If there's anything else you wanted to add to that picture about like the work you put into it, let me know. Otherwise, what are some other examples of you using historical religious imagery in your illustrations?
Yeah. That one was definitely one of my favorite pages. And it was like when we, a lot of people actually don't include that line in the creed. Certain denominations will ignore that one. And we chose to keep it because that was the earliest form. And so it was like, oh, what life of Jesus moment do we put here? And so, we definitely returned to, Byzantine iconography. And you have Jesus bursting into Hades, pulling up Adam and Eve. And I love one of the lines that Ben put in there, that Jesus, he went down as far as we have fallen. And it's like, Jesus, this is a triumphant, conquering of death. And like you said, he's shattering all the locks and he's tearing down the doors. And Adam and Eve were like, the original sinners, like being lifted up. So the symbolism in that one is awesome. You guys could spend a long time just thinking about that. But we like to do that a lot. In the Apostles' Creed one, the life everlasting page, there's a lot of symbolism in there. Todd was going crazy. He's like, put communion in there, and I want a river flowing out of the throne, and I want the tree of life shaped like a cross. And I'm like, Todd, I can't do all that. Anyway, I ended up doing it all, and because he made me. And he's like, more people, more. I want the Hebrew writing up on the walls that says the Lord, He is there. And I want, it's like he wanted everything. So that one's got a lot. You can spend a good 20 minutes looking at that one. Another one I really like is from the Easter book. It's the page. So the way that the Easter book is laid out is Jesus seeking and saving the lost. So every spread, it says, there's someone from Jesus' life, like his mother Mary. Did Jesus seek and save her? Yes. That's the whole yes thing. And so we have, and it kind of walks through Jesus' life. And so the one for the Emmaus friends, like did, his friends that he talked to on the road to Emmaus, did Jesus seek and save them? And that one was really fun because you have this, like the moment that the Emmaus friends realized who he was is when they sat down and broke bread together. And so you have like this one also like kind of pulled from some icons I've seen where Jesus is holding the broken bread like this, or his face is between the two broken pieces. And so there's like this symbolism of Jesus is found and realized and understood, in the breaking of his body. And then behind him, there's like art that looks kind of like, seraphim, like wings behind him, kind of like looking like that Ark of the Covenant look. And there's like Hebrew writing on the table. And that one was really fun. That one was really cool. I'm sure there's lots more, but those are the ones that come to mind.
So I'm looking at the page for In the Life Everlasting right now, and I can tell I'm going to spend a whole lot of time with this in the near future. So if you want to create like a video or some social media post, just like pointing out all the Easter eggs there, I will be all about that. So that is really great. One
funny thing about that one is like Todd was like, put some flowers in there. So I threw in some tulips. My husband's like, Tasha, what have you done? They're gonna think you're plugging Calvinism. I'm like, yeah. Well, the Calvinists will be happy. So that was like an unintentional Easter egg.
That's amazing. I can't unsee it now, is the thing.
Yep, I know. Neither can I. Every time I'm like, I had my Calvinist stage. I won't deny it, but yeah.
If any of our listeners there are either current or former Calvinists, you can just tell yourself that Tasha put that in there for you.
I did
just for you. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the different what you said earlier about the sort of style meshing together. Really, like when you said it was like, oh, that is it. So like the Byzantine iconography, then you said like classic Disney. So let's take each of those piece by piece. So first off, why of all the various, really beautiful Christian art traditions, why did you focus on the Byzantine tradition?
Well, like one of the reasons is because, so I'm like a major Ivan Earl fan. He's a painter from, I don't know, 60s. Gosh, the fact that I don't know is a crime, but he did all the art for the old Sleeping Beauty movie. Lots of like long, tall, skinny structures and really, really unique trees. Just go Google Ivan Earl and
what's
tree.
Ivan? Okay, how do you spell that? I'm currently Googling it as I'm.
It's a EYVIND and then EARLE, I think. I hope.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, wow, isn't this just great podcast content, listeners? I'm going through images on Google search like, yeah, this looks familiar. I love that guy. So yes, cosign.
I hope you saw it. Yeah.
All right. So that really makes sense in terms of sort of is it okay to call that a Disney style? Because I know he did some stuff. You said he did some stuff for Disney.
Yeah, it's like he's one very specific painter that I really like, but he captures some of that, the old fashioned, like feels accessible to everyone kind of art, very, very classy. And so he actually like did some Byzantine-esque, art. And so I kind of like, and I super love icons. If I picked up my camera and moved around, you'd see them everywhere. So it's like, I liked it already, but also because like meshing those two together, like I said, it felt like both, like you could be more reverent with it. That was like a really big thing, is like it kind of conjures this reverent feel. And while we wanted to make it accessible for kids, we also wanted there to be this like respect about the theology that we're trying to like present, like when I'm doing a baby board book right now, and it's probably going to be the only baby board book you'll ever see that has the crucifixion in it. But I did the crucifixion, and there's like Todd would ask, there's lots of animals in this book, and one of the critiques from the team was like, some of these animals don't look reverent. Like we have got to like be able to walk this, balance. And so that was part of why we picked the Byzantine, is like, just conjures up feelings when you see it.
No, that really makes sense the way you described it. So I think you're sort of Sleeping Beauty, Ivan Earl style. I really think it works because comparing your drawings to seeing what they were based on, because like Earl's drawings are, they're fairy tales. They're clearly fairy tale scapes, but they seem to be. It's very clear he takes his subject very seriously, right? Yeah. Like you can see there's sort of deeper level to it there. So you can have on one hand the fairy tale story, but on the other hand, you have sort of this deeper level to it. And I think that's something you do with this as well. And something about, the Byzantines and a lot of medieval art, you can have very reverent and very exuberant stuff at the same time, it seems. Yeah. So now let's switch gears slightly and talk about sort of the arrangement of the words here. Now, again, I know you're the illustrator, but it seems like you did have a lot of input on the way these are done. So one of the things I appreciate with a lot of these is you almost do it's almost like a question and answer, like a catechism, right? So one of these is looking at the Holy Catholic Church Communion of Saints. Where is God in the world today? So like the question, then you answer it. God's life is shared with Jesus and with all his brothers and sisters. I believe in the Holy Spirit. Is God far away? Has Jesus left me all alone? No, God is near, very near. Was this? Am I correct in thinking this is sort of a callback to the original catechism roots there?
Yeah. That's definitely at play. Another big aspect was just Ben's writing. He did the first. He did the first book, and after that, we were like, oh, every book has to be like this. Like he just has a way with words. It's so, and he's very much like he's a professor. It's like very much like teaching through asking questions, and like almost like you're finding out the answer by voicing it out yourself. So it's like there's definitely that whole catechism feel, but it's also like again asking questions and like teaching kids to like mull over things and Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So after Ben did it that way, we were like, okay, we got to do all the books. Harold did Lord's Prayer and Ten Commandments. And my editor, Todd, did the Christmas and Easter books. And Christmas and Easter are a bit different, but Harold definitely followed kind of Ben's vision there. Did a really good job.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I'm looking through the Lord's Prayer book, and like the line, "Hallowed be thy name." Lord, teach us to pray. Hallowed be your name. Can we make God's name holy? No, God's name is already holy. So it has that. And also you mentioned this. I think it's so good. It, like when a parent's reading it to their kids, it's something, it's also interactive, right? You could picture like parent reading, can we make God's name holy? And the kids yelling, no, because it lets the kids get involved. And also, like you said, it lets the kids start mulling over some really deep and really important questions, like sort of trusting the kids to dig into this through asking them questions almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that makes me want to transition to sort of the final step here, and that's sort of the nature of the catechism for the family in the first place. So sounds like you were sort of brought onto this team once the idea was already sort of starting to germinate. But what was your understanding of the perceived need here, right? Because it seems like your publisher, Lexham Press, does a lot of teaching already. So it was the thought of, okay, we need to take this teaching and apply it to very, very tiny children.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I love about working with Lexham Press. I mean, if you like pick up a random book and open to the first page, the odds are really good there's going to be a prayer there. Todd's kind of the head editor there, and he's like, put a prayer in, it's like, get prayers in there. He's awesome. And one of the things he often says is that, and I think is quite true, is that when parents are teaching their children, we stress over what words to bring in prayer. And so one of the visions behind putting family prayer in there is giving parents words to pray, like giving the whole family something. This book is like a gift to your family. There's words here, just pray them. And there's kind of a family service, call and response in every book. So it's more than just a resource. It's more than just like a story. It's like a resource for families. That was all Todd's vision. And I love it. Like we use it as a family. It's really special.
Yeah. What do you think the special value is of having a call and response as opposed to just like having the kids listen or something like that? Like what's the value of saying parents read something, then kids say something in response?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll get a lot of head nods when I say this, but kids, I'm a homeschooling mom, and I'm like, kids learn so much more when they're interacting. Like we all know this is true. We recently became Anglican, my family did. And it was so different. I grew up evangelical, and it was so different being in a service where you were a part of the service. The whole church is doing call and response. We're all reading God's word together. We're all chanting these psalms, and you connect in a really different way. You learn in a different way. Your brain connects in a different way when you're involved. And so kids, it's like when the kid, like you said, with your kids downstairs all shouting yes, it's like, oh man, they are connecting. There's like emotion in this, So I'm like, I feel like it kind of speaks for itself, like why I think a family service like this would be beneficial for the family. It's like, imagine your kids not just sitting there listening to prayer, like, hey, Whitley, shut your eyes. It's like, oh, they're all a part of it. They get to be a part of it, and they get to wait their turn to say something. They're investing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have noticed that too, because it's nothing super unusual that we do, but me and my wife will say the Lord's Prayer with our kids every night before bed. So then in church, when we say the Lord's Prayer, I think it was just this last week, my 2-year-old looks at me and is like, "Daddy, this is the prayer we say during bedtime." So it's like helps connect. It's like, okay, yeah, you see, it's just not this thing we do. This thing we do at church is connected with what we're doing here at the home. And that's another thing that I thought was very interesting with your book. So you have a note to parents, and among other things you say there is that the family is basically a little church. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I didn't write it, but I agree with it. Yeah,
your team. What did your team mean?
Yes. What did the team? I'm like opening. I'm like, let's see. Let me find that page. Yeah, families. We've even had some people write and be like, families are not churches. We're like, okay, we know that, but it's like we do believe you need to go to church.
Yeah. You know what we mean, everyone. Come on.
Yeah, come on. Work with me here. Yeah. So yeah, it's like, it's, from a symbolism point of view, you have the parents, the head of the family, and you have the children. And when we gather together, we are God's people gathering together, so it's like a big vision behind these books is like equipping the family to be like a mini compact version of the church. Like, yeah, I guess that's kind of how I see it.
Awesome. So we are running low on time. So closing question I have for you is just about what kind of feedback you've heard from readers, from maybe some of the kids, parents, and all that. I'll start with mine because Tasha, you know this because we've sort of we were talking about beforehand. But my 6-year-old, he has this stuffed shark that he got a long time ago named Sharky, because that's what you name things when you're a kid. And he enjoys drawing pictures of Sharky and putting them into different things. So he, one day after, we're reading through the FatCat books, I think he had it on his mind, like the life everlasting, right? So he tells us like, look, here's Sharky. He's at a very, very big table. And there's every kind of shark at this table. It's like where you get where he's going with it, where it's like, okay, so sort of it's like marriage supper of the lamb, and it's a big table, and yeah, everybody's there. Every type of shark is there. So it's sort of like this little thing with him drawing shark pictures, but it made me and my wife know, like, hey, I think he's actually getting it. Hey, that's great. So that was great for us. Any other things you've heard from like the benefits or the things you noticed from your readers?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fun. We've gotten some really fun feedback. There's one family that they sent us a video of their daughter, it's like 5 years old or something, going to class. She had memorized the Apostles' Creed, and she went to class dressed as a cat, like dressed as FatCat, because she had so deeply connected with that book that she wanted to recite the Apostles' Creed dressed as a cat. And I definitely drew her into the end of the 10 Commandments book. At the end of every book, there's a big amen spread with every amen spread. There's more animals. You can blame Todd. And in that one, I asked for permission. I was like, can I put her in there? Because that was the best thing I've ever seen.
That is amazing.
That was really sweet. It's really cool to hear how many people are telling me that it's the book their kids pick off the shelf. And to me, that's special because it's it tells me there's a connection. It tells me that there's an emotional connection. I mean, I also get a lot of really cool feedback from my kids. My daughter, Issa, was telling me the other day, she's like, I just love, I'm like, well, this is such a profound thing for a kid to say. She's like, I just love the expressions on Jesus' face. Just makes me want to be with him. I'm like, what? Yes, this is amazing. So it's okay, if I've been able to illustrate a Jesus that feels really safe and loving to kids, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. So now in our closing couple minutes here, what is next for you? Are there more? Like I mentioned, 10 Commandments book will be out January 2024. So everyone keep a lookout for it now. Are there more FatCat books sort of in the hopper? Are you going to branch off in different directions? What's next for you?
Yeah, I think I'll be doing, if I'm allowed to, I'll be doing as much FatCat as I can in this life. It's just the funnest. I get to nerd out theologically. I get to draw, and I get to I'll airplay my screen onto the TV, and the kids will just sit there and watch the drawing come into being because I do everything on my iPad. It's such a big part of our family's life. So there's always different stages going on. So right now, 10 Commandments is in at the printers. I just got I'm holding the first proof copy in my hand, and then I just finished the art for, we're doing a baby board book, like I mentioned. So it's kind of like your first FatCat book. It's just Jesus, and animals. And it's basically who is Jesus? Who is this man? As simple as it goes. And there are so many animals in this book. Todd finally got what he wanted, except he still is like, do you think you could add any more? But
Just a couple more.
just a couple more. So that one's really fun to do because like it's like, oh, make everything like bigger eyes because it's for babies and like really like colorful. Like I just got to like turn the color knob up to 11, so that was cool. And then I'm about to start. We're like just having the first meeting, starting our next project, which is going to be a morning and evening prayer book. I'm really excited about this one. So it's going to be like a flip book. So each side of the neighbor kids are ringing our bell. Sorry about that. It's like each side of the book is like the front of a book. So it's like one side is morning, one side is night. And then the middle page is kind of this like mesh in between that I'm really excited about. As an artist, I think it's going to be a fun challenge. But so it's designed to be like the book that kids read in the morning when they get up, and then you read at night. And it's kind of based off some of the morning and evening prayer collects, from some of Luther's stuff, and kind of Book of Common Prayer feel. So yeah, that one's going to be fun. Yeah.
No, that sounds absolutely fantastic. And yeah, Tasha Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us here. So where can listeners find you and your work? Where can they find the FatCat books?
Well, my handle just about everywhere is at Natasha Kennedy with a U instead of a Y. It just looks like a typo. And you can find FatCat wherever books are sold, Amazon, the Lexham Press website. Yeah. And I think 10 Commandments just went up. Like you can pre-order it on Amazon. So
great.
That. Yeah.
Well, if it can be pre-ordered, I can pretty much guarantee my wife already has. So you'll have at least one sale already.
That's awesome.
But again, listeners, please check these out. Like seriously, me and my kids and my wife, we love these so much. We find them so beneficial for us. And again, Tasha, thank you for joining us at the table. And listeners, as y'all can probably tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have a few seconds to spare, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.